IELTS Writing Task 1, Lesson 3, Bar Charts. Bar charts can show numbers changing over a period of time. For example, if we take a bar chart with this title, Number of Computers Sold by Two Different Shops. We'll look at Shop A and Shop B on this bar chart. We can see number of sales on the left from 0 to 100 and the months April to July along the bottom. If we take then Shop A in these bars, you can see that the number of computers sold by Shop A increases from April to July, so we could connect those months with a line, whereas Shop B has fairly stable figures that don't really change very much. In other words, we could have drawn two lines instead of bars. This type of bar chart is the same as a line graph, and if you watch the previous lesson that I did about line graphs, you'll see how I recommend approaching them. However, bar charts don't always show time. They often only compare numbers. Let's look at another example. Number of items sold by two different shops in July. This is almost the same, but only in July. Here's the bar chart, Shop A and Shop B again, but the important thing is that at the bottom of the chart we have laptop, PC, tablet and mobile. 4 items instead of 4 months. So there is no change over the months because we don't have any, we only have July. If you drew a line like this, it would be wrong. You can't say laptop increases to PC or tablet increases to mobile. We can't talk about changes over time here. What we can do is compare A and B, Shop A, Shop B, for one item. So compare those two, you would say something like the number of laptops sold was in Shop A and in Shop B. Instead of comparing Shop A and Shop B, you could compare two different items in Shop A. Shop A sold nearly 100 mobiles but less than 25 laptops. You could compare those two figures. So your job is to compare the bars, whether it's with time or with just items. It doesn't matter, you're comparing the bars. And first, you should make a very general comparison between the bars. This is for your summary or overview paragraph. For example, if we use our bar chart and look for the most general information, I would notice that this is easily the highest figure, mobile phone sales in Shop A. And looking at Shop B, I'd probably just say that the figures are similar for all 4 items. We're not going to give the numbers, the number of sales. We're just going to talk in general about those highest or similar figures. Second, compare specific numbers. This is for your details paragraphs, paragraphs 3 and 4. This time you need to compare and give the numbers. For example, compare the numbers of laptops sold in both shops, or compare the highest for each shop, PC for Shop B and mobile for Shop A. You're going to make lots of comparisons showing the numbers. Now it's time to move on to our full bar chart question for today. Here's the question that we're going to use. The chart below shows global sales of the top 5 mobile phone brands between 2009 and 2013. Global mobile phone sales by brand. You can see on the left units sold in millions. That just means the number of phones sold. So the top number on the chart is 500 million mobile phones. You've got the makes of phone along the bottom, Samsung, Apple, etc. And you've got the 3 years, and you can see the different figures. In this chart, we have to be careful. We've got items along the bottom, so you can't say Samsung decreased to Apple. That would be very strange. But we also have years, so we can compare the years within each item. So we'll see how we do that later. First, let's look at our structure. We know we have to write 4 paragraphs: introduction, overview, details, details, and no conclusion. Let's start with the introduction. Paraphrase the question. Here's the question again. The chart below shows global sales of the top 5 mobile phone brands between 2009 and 2013. And we go through this question bit by bit, changing some of the words if we can. Let's start with the chart below shows. I've written the bar chart compares. Next, global sales of mobile phone. I'm missing out the top 5 brands for now. So global sales of mobile phone, the number of mobile phones sold worldwide. Now we'll go on to the top 5 brands by the 5 most popular manufacturers. Manufacturers means makers, producers. Finally, the years between 2009 and 2013, I've written in the years 2009, 2011 and 2013. 3 separate years. So overall, that's my introduction finished. The bar chart compares the number of mobile phones sold worldwide by the 5 most popular manufacturers in the years 2009, 2011 and 2013. That's 1 paragraph done. Now we move on to the overview. 2 sentences, 2 main points. So let's look at the bar chart and decide what our 2 main points will be. Here's the chart again. The first thing that I notice is this. In 2009 and 2011, Nokia definitely had the highest numbers of sales. Another thing that I notice is this. In 2013, Samsung becomes the most popular. So the highest figures first. Another thing that we could see is that we have increasing numbers for these 2 brands, Samsung and Apple. The other numbers, Nokia, LG and ZTE, either decrease or stay very similar. So those 2 increases could be something to point out in our overview. Let's see what I wrote for this overview then. First sentence. It is clear that Nokia sold the most mobile phones between 2009 and 2011, but Samsung became the best-selling brand in 2013. There I've just chosen the highest figures. Second sentence. Samsung and Apple saw the biggest rises in sales over the 5-year period. So I've put those 2 increases that we saw together in 1 sentence. And that's the overview finished. It is clear that Nokia sold the most mobile phones between 2009 and 2011, but Samsung became the best-selling brand in 2013. Samsung and Apple saw the biggest rises in sales over the 5-year period. And that's it. 2 paragraphs done. Now we can move on to describe the details. 2 paragraphs, compare the bars. Looking at the chart again, let's decide what to put in paragraph 3. One technique that I often use for this type of question with items is to group together the items. For example, what I'm going to do today is take Samsung and Nokia, because they're the highest in all 3 years, and I'm going to just describe and compare them in paragraph 3. I'll mention the other 3 brands in paragraph 4. So let's look at what we could say about Samsung and Nokia in paragraph 3. Well, the first thing we could do is start with the first year, 2009, and make a comparison between these 2 figures. But then we could say what happens over the next 4 years. 2011 and 2013, we get this decrease in the numbers of sales by Nokia. On the other hand, by contrast, we get this increase in sales from Samsung to a high point which is very similar to the initial high figure of Nokia back in 2009. So I think there's some really good comparing that we could do between Samsung and Nokia in those 3 different years. Let's look at how I did that in a paragraph, paragraph 3. In 2009, Nokia sold close to 450 million mobile phones, which was almost double the number of handsets sold by the second most successful manufacturer, Samsung. Notice I've used the word handsets in there, that's just another word for mobile phones. Moving on. Over the following 4 years, however, Nokia's sales figures fell by approximately 200 million units, whereas Samsung saw sales rise by a similar amount. By 2013, Samsung had become the market leader with sales reaching 450 million units. That's the paragraph finished. Notice all I've done in this paragraph is talk about Nokia and Samsung, the highest selling brands. Before writing paragraph 4 in a similar way, let's just stay with paragraph 3 and look at some of the language that we've used, especially language for making comparisons and language for describing changes over time. Starting with the comparisons, we've got language like almost double, second most successful, whereas, had become the market leader, comparing the 2 items, Nokia and Samsung. And we're also, as I said, describing changes over time. So we've got language like over the following 4 years, sales figures fell by approximately 200 million units, saw sales rise by a similar amount. We're describing the changes over the 3 different years. So that's paragraph 3 finished, and now let's move on to paragraph 4. We need to look at the chart again and decide for paragraph 4 what to put. We have to, of course, group together the 3 other providers of mobile phones, Apple, LG and ZTE. Let's start with 2009. You can see the 3 figures there. We could compare them. And then we can move on to 2011, where we see that Apple has become higher than the other 2. And moving on to 2013, we've got a good increase there for Apple, but a decrease for LG, and not much change for ZTE. Those are the things that I'll describe in this paragraph. Let's look at what I wrote then. The other 3 top-selling mobile phone brands between 2009 and 2013 were LG, ZTE and Apple. In 2009, these companies sold around 125 million, 50 million and 25 million mobile handsets respectively. Respectively is a good word to use there when we're ordering the 3 figures that have come before. But Apple overtook the other 2 vendors in 2011. Overtook means it went above. Next sentence. In 2013, purchases of Apple handsets reached 150 million units, while LG saw declining sales and the figures for ZTE rose only slightly. That's the paragraph finished. I've written 3 sentences there as usual. Let's have a look at the language for comparisons and changes over time, like we did for paragraph 3. Comparisons first. LG, ZTE and Apple, these companies sold. We've got a comparison between the 3 companies. And then you've got 3 figures, and then respectively, that puts the 3 figures in the correct order. Apple overtook the other 2, that's a comparison, and while and are also comparing words. Don't forget that and but are very common and good comparing words to use. Now let's look at the language for changes over time. Overtook the other 2 vendors in 2011. Purchases of Apple handsets reached. LG saw declining sales. Figures for ZTE rose only slightly. That's where we're talking about what happens over the years, the increase and decrease language. And that's paragraph 4 finished. and which means the whole report is finished because we have no conclusion in writing task 1. You can read that full report in more detail or more carefully by downloading the accompanying worksheet next to this lesson. Before you do that, let's look at some vocabulary to finish off, specifically vocabulary for paraphrasing, comparing and describing changes that I used in this report. First, the question used the words global sales and I changed that to sold worldwide. I also wrote sales figures, purchases, most popular, best-selling brand, top-selling, second most successful manufacturer, market leader, mobile phones. Instead of that, we wrote handsets, units, brands. That came from the question, but I also wrote manufacturers, companies, vendors. Saw the biggest rises, saw declining sales. This is our language of change over time. Close to, almost, approximately, around. When you're giving figures, you can use words like this to show that they're not exact figures. Double the number, more comparisons between figures. Rise by a similar amount. Respectively, we talked about ordering the numbers using that word. And finally, overtook the other two vendors. Those are the good words and phrases that I think the examiner would notice. That's the end of this lesson about bar charts. Print the worksheet, watch the lesson again, and analyse each sentence carefully. There are some exercises on the worksheet that will help you to understand even better what I've presented today. Next lesson, we'll look at pie charts.